Well, and welcome everybody to Coffee Table Talk. This is our second event. Very excited tonight to have Arlene Bice, Zan Johns, and Marcella Remund, who are going to be working with me and talking about anthologies and other things poetry as well. First of all, I just would like to say if we could go around the room and maybe just introduce ourselves and just who our name is and where we're from, that would be awesome. We could start with Arlene.
On the border, but I'm originally from New Jersey. But I've been down here almost 20 years, and I love being south of the border. So it's quite different, but it's been a good move. And I write. And that's probably the extent of me.
Thank you. Zan? You have to unmute yourself, honey.
It told me you unmuted me. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zanita Johns, and I am signing in from Westminster, Colorado. I'm originally from Louisiana, but I came to Colorado to attend school and never left. I retired from the University of Colorado and just published my first book of poems last year. I'm happy to be here today.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
I'm Dennis Gray from Cincinnati, Ohio. And for the past 40 years, I've been a videographer, teaching video in high school as well. I wrote my book, An Apology to a Fish, about 40 years ago. And I just took up writing again, thanks to COVID. And
Yes.
I'm having a lot of fun with it.
And COVID's bringing out a lot of writers that have had some sitting back on the back burner. Somebody's got a dog barking.
Yeah, that's me. I'll mute myself.
Thank you, dear. All right, Hannah.
Hello, I'm Hannah. I'm now living in Raleigh, North Carolina, originally from Massachusetts and New York City, and writing poetry, and also found my manuscript for a how-to book on tarot. And I'm also working on a tarot mystery. So glad to be here.
Thank you. Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren, and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am not a professional writer or freelance writer, but recently I've published some things in some anthologies, thanks to being a member of TAF, Triangle Association of Freelance Writers. And I've actually been an attorney for about 30 years. So I write a lot, but just not fun stuff. So it's been nice to write some fun stuff and get that creative spark going that I used to have before law school sucked it all out of me. So thanks.
Understand. Thank you. Joyce. Joyce,
Hey, guys.
there you go. Thank you, dear.
Joyce is originally from Maryland and moved down here with my IBM job. Recently retired, and I'm a very late blooming poet. Got 3 poems published last summer, so I'm off to a start anyway. But I'm doing this for fun because my job was very analytical, and I was burnt out on it, and I couldn't wait to just be creative. So yay, I'm free.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Marcella.
Well, hi, I'm Marcella Remund, and I am originally from Omaha, Nebraska, but I've lived for the past 25 years in South Dakota, where I have been teaching at the University of South Dakota. This is my last semester, And I have 2 books of poetry. The Sea is My Ugly Twin and the Book of Crooked Prayer. I can't wait until I have more time to write. So that's me.
Thank you. Sam?
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm also in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm not a professional writer at all. I'm actually an elementary school teacher, and started writing poetry fairly recently, but it's been a nice kind of little break, something to do just for me. So.
Thank you. Alyssa?
Hi, I'm Alyssa. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I seem to have a theme of my writing. I like to write science poetry for children, and I've taken a break because my work, which is as a biostatistician, is kind of overwhelming, and especially more so since the pandemic. And I'm working at home, and now the hours have expanded, and so I'm just here to enjoy listening and learning, and I hope to write again soon.
Thank you. Stacy? Stacy? There you go.
Yes. Hi, I'm Stacy Patterson. I am a finance attorney, but have also been working on my writing, my poetry, and my blog, which is Mugglestones and Mayhem. I have, and also a voice actor for narrating audiobooks on Audible. And I have been wanting to join more poetry groups. And this one popped up on my meetup. I'm in Houston, although I'm from Kansas City. And I said, what a great opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you. Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather Knight. I grew up in West Virginia, and I've lived in lots of places because I worked at Roche and then Bristol Myers Squibb, and then I joined a biotech here. So I've lived in New Jersey, Connecticut, France, Seattle, and now here.
Wow. Well traveled. Goodness.
Yeah, and I mean, I started writing little poetry when I was a kid, and now it's just when it hits me. I don't usually know when it's going to hit, but it just does.
Right. Wonderful. Sheree?
Hi, everybody. My name is Sheree Brown, and I'm located here in Raleigh, North Carolina. However, I grew up in Ohio, grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and then lived in Cincinnati many years until moving here about 8 years ago. So I write poetry and am looking to become published. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be in you all's presence this evening, and thank you, Lisa, for coordinating this meetup. Really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all again for coming tonight. I really appreciate your being here. You know, when we talk about anthologies, you know, they go back to long ago. When people would put together accountings of different events, and they would combine those. I guess you can, in a way, I wouldn't go so far as to say this, you know, officially, but you can almost say the Bible has a certain anthology kind of point of view too, because you have different stories in one book. An anthology can be poetry. It could be a combination of poetry and nonfiction, fiction, any kind of writing. I know Arlene on her anthology, she combines poetry and essay. You see that quite a bit with anthology that I find it very interesting. So anthologies take on all kinds of different, you know, genres to come together. Now, one thing about anthologies is that it really does have an extended shelf life. One of the advantages is that when you have an anthology, it's like having a book on the shelf. It's not like your own published, 100% published by you book. However, it's not going anywhere. Like a magazine is very timely, and it's on the stands, it's off the stands, ends up in the recycle pile or whatever. Unless of course you're saving your contribution. It doesn't have quite the staying power as if it's in a book. So, and it's also has that advantage too of having something you can share with other people as a gift or anything like that. And different anthologies take on different themes. So I just did an anthology called Heartbeats, and we talked about what makes your heart beat. Arlene is doing an anthology now about Jane Austen. So it's all about Jane Austen. It could be poetry. I'll let her tell more about it when I have her come on. But she's, having that anthology. Having one coming up in the fall called Spark the Light, and that's going to be about dealing with physical challenges and working through those. So there are all kinds of ways that anthologies come about. One of the other big pieces about an anthology is that it gets you out there. People who are looking to publish publish an entire manuscript of their own, it looks really good in their manuscript to have acknowledgments for anthologies or other publications. And to me, anthologies is one of the best ways to get your work out there. And then you can use that to show publishers that, okay, she's out there, he's out there getting his words or her words out there and published. Shows that the writer is making the effort. So those are some things about anthologies I wanted to touch on. Now I'm going to ask Arlene if she could talk a little bit about her anthology experience. She's kind of inspired me to do this anthology that I did, so I look to her as my mentor. Arlene, can you tell us about your experience with anthologies?
Sure. I began publishing anthologies for the Warren Artist Market about 8 years ago. I do it as a volunteer. I'm part of that. It's the Warren Artist Market. But we decided we wanted to do, I looked at anthologies and I said, I can do that. So I started there, and each year I made mistakes along the way, but each year I learned from it. And I encouraged people to submit for name recognition. That's a really an important part of getting your name published. Plus, when someone picks up an anthology and reads through it, they see your style of writing also, which is what Lisa was talking about. So I've done several anthologies. I have always, I guess I have 2 writing groups going now at the same time. And I've also published an anthology for each of them so that they could also get their word out there. But that's kind of a different thing, almost like a chapbook. But now, of course, it's easy to publish. So I've done anthologies for them. And then last year I got the idea of, how about what is it to be a woman? I thought that was a great subject, and I see the smiles now. It was a great subject, and I had a good response. So this year I rejoined the Jane Austen Society through a friend and a colleague in Taft. And then the idea came to me, why not an anthology on Jane Austen? I couldn't find any on Amazon. So I've started, and that's what I'm accepting submissions now. And even if you don't know who Jane Austen is or have opinions about her, you can Google her quotes. One of my writers found her quote about libraries, and she wrote, it's nonfiction, about her experience in the library as a child, which was not a good experience. But it related to Jane Austen's quotes even though she was not overly familiar with Jane Austen. So that's another way that you can take a subject and make it work for you. That's pretty much what I have to say. I prefer anthologies that are either nonfiction, and between poetry and prose or essays is fine. I don't like the mixed fiction in there because when I'm reading an anthology, I have a mindset. And if I'm looking for something that I believe is a true story, and at the end it says this is fiction, I'm grossly disappointed. So next year, I'm also going to do an anthology, but it will be on fiction only. And this will be separate from the poetry. Well, of course, you can even write stories through a poetry too. I did also a biographical poetic memoir on one part of my life using just poetry. But I like the anthologies for the same reason. It's a book that I'll slip into my tote bag and take with me if I'm going to with an appointment anywhere, because it's easy to read something. Whereas if you have a novel, you just about get into a good part and they call you for your appointment. Sorry about that. It's my neighbor, I'm sure. My quiet little neighborhood always becomes unquiet when I least want it to. So but that's a personal preference. Other people, of course, do things their way. But I like anthologies, and I'm open to questions at any time, anything to do with writing. Just if you get my email, you can always ask me a question of any kind. People have helped me to get where I am today, and I feel that that's, well, what I want to do. I want to help people, especially writing. If I can help them, guide them in any way that I'm here. I think that's it.
All right, thanks, Arlene. And I did put your links in the chat. I have your Amazon link and your Purple Stone blog announcement about Jane Austen.
Thank you.
People can go there and find out more information. Zan, I understand you recently were involved in a collection of works.
Yes.
Maybe you can tell us about that.
Okay. This is the book that I participated in. It's a collaborative book that was published by the Women Speakers Association. And last summer, I joined that organization in the interest of helping me focus and get the word out about my debut book of poetry. The Women Speakers Association is currently recruiting writers for the next publication, the next edition, which will come out in February of next year. What I did, this is the first time, I'm in the 4th edition of the book, and this is the first time that it has featured poetry. These are stories written by 40 women across the globe. It's an international book. And I decided to use my chapter. Each writer gets to submit up to 1,000 words. I decided to use my chapter to help talk about poetry, to talk about my own book and my own writing. And as it turned out, when I met with the CEO and founder of Women Speakers Association, she loved one of my poems so much so that she decided to use my poem, What Matters, as the dedication page in the book. And I'm really proud of that. That's another way to get our poetry out into the world. I may share that with you later, but I wanted to tell you that piece. The other, what felt good to me about participating in that anthology or collaborative book was I made 39 new friends in the middle of a pandemic. The other benefit is we've got 40 women promoting one book, and it became an international #1 bestseller within a week. Everyone's putting the word out. So like you, Arlene, I think I love anthologies and I'd love to see more of them. In preparation for today, Lisa, if you'll allow me to indulge myself, I wrote a poem that I'd love to read this one now just to get it behind me. And it's called Anthology. So you're my guinea pigs, bear with me. The voices speak volumes, expressions from distinct lives in a bound literary gallery of exclusive canvases, painted by multicolored hands holding multicolored pens. Imagine each poem's purposeful presence on the canvas, bearing common or varied messages, formed by diverse trains of thought, penned by diverse souls from various places around the world. Every entry bearing its portion of private intention, its provision of emotional vulnerability, its supply of intellectual prowess, each submitted and considered, judged and selected, chosen as worthy of inclusion with the others, forever featured as one in the coveted anthology of poetry.
Thank you, Zan. The way I feel like when
Yeah.
I put my anthology together, it's like I'm getting to know all these people. You know, there are 40
Yes.
some people. It's like, yeah, like my whole poetry community just expanded more, and I love it. You know, because I feel like we're
Mhm.
family, and you know, the more the merrier.
Yes.
Marcella, now would you like to share with us about your experience with anthologies as well as tell us about your books?
Sure. Well, I don't have any experience like Arlene and Zan. I don't have any experience at the editing or publishing end of things, but I have had quite a few poems included in anthologies. And I'm going to agree with Arlene and Lisa too that an anthology is a great way to not just get your work out there, but to get your name around communities of other writers. So it's a great networking tool also. And I have, I'll just show you a few. One of the things I really love about anthologies is that they can be topical. And usually I've got one poem sitting around somewhere that's just right for the topic, you know, that maybe isn't fitting into a manuscript yet, but is out there floating around and works great for an anthology. So that's another nice thing from a writerly side. So I have poems in this anthology, which is about emerging Nebraska poets. This is an anthology about fear. This is an anthology about, I had a couple poems. I had a stroke in 2012 and recovered just fine, but I had a couple poems about that stroke and, you know, didn't really have a place for those poems. But somebody put together an anthology on suffering and they worked great for this anthology. And then an anthology about nostalgia and missing our old neighborhoods. I had a couple poems that worked for that. So I also just wanted to say that state poetry societies are really good resources for if a person is looking for an anthology to submit to, because a lot of times one of the things that state poetry societies make it their mission to do, and also state poets laureate make it their mission to do, is put together anthologies within states. So a lot of times state poetry societies can give you the heads up about those projects, which are great places to publish. And then my own little books, I have a chapbook called The Sea is My Ugly Twin, and I think I'm trying to remember how many of these poems. A couple of these poems first appeared in anthologies before I put the chapbook together. And I live in South Dakota, which is completely landlocked. So of course, these are all poems about water. And then I have my first full-length collection, the Book of Crooked Prayer. Several of these poems were first in anthologies. So I thought I'd read you one of the poems from the book that appeared in an anthology first. Let me see if I can find my bookmark. So it appeared in this book about nostalgia, this anthology about nostalgia and missing our youth and our neighborhoods. And and this poem is called, so the poems in the Book of Crooked Prayer are all sort of poems about how incredibly spiritual and sacred our daily lives are. Everything about our daily lives, washing dishes, peeling peaches for canning. So they're all sort of prayers and meditations, but kind of turned on their heads a little bit. So this is one of those, and it's called Totem. I am carving you into me, beloved. Totem, rune, petroglyph, icon, map. Help me decode the world. Paralyzed by the impossibility of spinning plates or gravity, I am only half, one ankle notched with the easy way you carry wood or level a crossbeam. Palms up, waiting for the red bloom of sudden wounds or the hiss of air from nailed tendons. I chisel into a cocked hip the simple way you love a dropped third, a chord shifting to minor. Crushed under the weight of a hummingbird feather, I cut into collarbone the way you stake trumpet vine, gather bee balm. I come to you, you etched into me. Teach me to love the ordinary, calm my fear of brevity, shield me from the cradle moon, from all things too heavy with wonder to bear. So,
Nice.
Wonderful. Thank you.
thank you. And then one last thing I thought I would put in the chat, a website that's one of my very, very favorite resources for new, emerging, and experienced poets, trishhopkinson.com, where she is absolutely brilliant about keeping a running list of places to submit and short articles about submitting. So it's been a great resource for me, and maybe it can help others too. And I'll just slip that in the chat. So
Thank you. That's a good segue too, because I was just getting ready to share where to find places who are accepting anthologies. So I'm gonna share my screen and show that. Sure, I'm showing the right page. Here we go. This is one that I rely on quite a bit. It's called Duotrope. This is a list of poetry anthologies and anthology series. Look at all of them. Some of them are closed. You know, you're gonna have to sift through it, but it's you know, I just put in the word anthology, so, and you can search more active ones. I like Duotrope because I can go in and look at my submissions, you know, and see, you know, what's been accepted and that keep track of things and such. But Duotrope is a good resource. Submittable is another one, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. Submittable. I just went in there and typed in anthologies, and these 3 items came up. Then on Facebook, This is a great one. Submissions, magazines, and publishers. And I'll put links into the chat for all of these that I'm showing you. This is a really nice one. Sometimes I add some links to that one. And this is Trish Hopkinson's No Fee Calls for Poems. It's really nice. Yeah, Trish really goes all out, does a really great job of sharing about what's out there. And sorry to leave you out of this, Dennis, but there's also a group on Facebook called Women Poets. I think that's how I found Marcella. And in that group, we often hear about anthologies. But generally speaking, if I find something on there, I share it on my Facebook page. So those are some. Did anybody else know some other places that they'd like to suggest? No? So what questions or discussion would you like to share about anthologies?
I wondered if Arlene wanted to say a little more about her anthology and the timeline.
Mm-hmm. I would love that.
The one that I'm waiting for submissions now?
Yes.
I've extended the submitting time until the end of April. But if I know someone is working on something and it's coming and they're running up against the deadline, just let me know. It's me. I'm the chief bottle washer over here, so I can always extend. And like I say, they're guidelines. They're not dyed in the wool, dead end ideas. But yeah, it's the end of April.
End of April. And I think I saw, correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the guidelines was for poems, if someone wanted to submit poems up to 5.
Yes. Poems, essays, or personal experiences, nonfiction.
And would you want the poems related, all 5, or say more about that,
you can
please?
submit 1 or you can submit 5, whatever you like, as long as they tie in somehow to the subject of Jane Austen. And it could be her movies, her characters, her books, her life, what she has done for us as writers. I mean, when you think about the late 1700s, there were very few women writers out who were successful, and she was successful. But you can also Google her quotes and take one of her quotes and write about how it relates to you. Yes. So it really doesn't have to be a Jane Austen context. It could be, you know, what you get from one of her quotes. And I had mentioned about that. This is the book that was What It Is to Be a Woman. I talked about the anthologies. Because I get so involved in words, I never did show you any of the covers. This is What If, and that is a prompt that I used for my writing group, and that was the anthology that came out of that. Another writing group, this is one of the early ones, Insights and Outsights. Can you see that all right? Because they tend to get thicker as we get more and more into them. This is Monday Morning Writers. That was another writing group. And this is one of the 8 that I did for the Warren Artist Market. This is called Inspirations, and it was an anthology of Warren County, North Carolina. So there was a very good response to that because the subject just touched everybody that Warren Artist Market is involved in, is located in North Carolina, in Warren County. So there are just a few. And the other reason to submit to an anthology is it's a good way of filling up your bookshelves.
Yeah, you look like you do a pretty good job of that, Arlene.
Yes.
I feel like a slacker.
In my Jane Austen anthology, I said that there would be a complimentary book sent out to the first 10 submissions, but actually everyone that submits and is accepted will receive a copy.
Okay. Do you
That's
have
something.
a target publication date yet?
Yes, the book will be out by June 1st. It'll be on the market by June 1st. I say
That's
I do
fast.
everything myself, so I'm able to do that. Yes. And it's exciting. It's every time I bring out Lisa, I'm sure you feel the same way. It's truly like giving a birth of a baby. I get so excited when something new is coming out, and it's a thrilling thing.
Yeah, I love
No stretch marks. Except for
I love
stretch
to
marks
see
of
those.
growing into it.
I do love to see those poems come in the inbox and the bios. And oh, that reminds me too about bios. One of the things that I would suggest as a recipient of bios for anthologies is to try to work on a 50-word bio. Keep it short. It makes it a little bit less paper in an anthology, and gives a little more concise. It only takes in about an inch on the page. So just a little suggestion. And one of the things that I'm probably going to ask for the next time I do one is to left margin it, because it's hard for me to get a form in place. If you're thinking of setting up an anthology, just from the voice experience now, after I've done one, is to ask people to left justify their margins so that it's easier when you go to publish it, because it's a little tricky, although it does look pretty.
Something else I wanted to mention about anthologies with poetry. If you want to know how your poetry is going to look on the page, when you're typing it up on the computer, put it into a 6x9 format. When poetry comes through and the lines are too long, I generally make suggestions and send it back to the author to let them see what I'm doing. I don't change anybody's work without their permission, but I like to let them know what it's going to look like in a 6x9 book, because normally you're typing out on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So that doesn't make any difference with prose so much, but with poetry it does. And it can make a big difference, your line breaks. So
Yeah.
that's kind of important to do.
That's a great idea, that 6x9.
But that confuses a lot of writers because they don't know how to go into the toolbox to change it. So I like to reassure you that if that is a problem, that I turn it back to you and we can work it out.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I like about working one-on-one with my people that submit their work, is I'm not a big corporation, I'm not a big company, I'm me. And like Lisa said, it's personal. When you work back and forth with someone who's writing, it becomes personal, and you do get to know each other on a personal level. It's amazing how that works, but it does. Yes.
Lisa, I was thinking about your the coffee table talk last week. The topic was social justice, right? And I wondered if you were aware of any anthologies that are requesting poems about social justice, or whether anyone wants to take that on.
I think that would be a great one. Does anybody here know of any? I don't know any off the top of my head.
I don't know.
I would check that duotrope list, because the list is so extensive that I'll bet there's something in there.
Yeah. I think I've seen some out that have already come out, but as far as calls for submissions, that's a great idea, and I think you room for more than one for sure. I write a lot of social justice poems that are just kind of sitting there waiting to find a home.
Right.
So does anybody have any questions?
If you are interested on getting on to having your email list. Sending me your email list. I will put it on, it'll automatically, any anthologies that I'm part of producing, I will send out notice to you. And they vary in subjects and topics. But if you just want notice of it, then I'm glad to put you on the list. And take you off the list if you want. That happens on occasion too. I divorced my wife, don't send me any more of these anthology submission things. That happened to me recently. I was, yeah, okay.
Now, if you're thinking about opening up an anthology outside of the United States, to include people from outside of the United States, and you're sending the book to someone in another country, there are certain criteria you have to follow to send that book. They have to provide a lot of information, sometimes what they call a PAN number or passport number, or something like that, in order to get there, because of customs and such, and other countries want to be careful what comes into their country. Also be prepared to pay a higher postage, and sometimes that can get a little costly. The other option would be to offer the ebook version of it. That way, you know, you can send it that way. Something just a little FYI. I enjoy having the whole multicultural feel to the anthology, so I'm glad I opened it up. But just, you know, if you're thinking about doing one, just take that into consideration.
Another thing occurs to me is one, you know, maybe the only good thing to come out of the pandemic is all the poetry communities that have sprung up online. And I would say, you know, for all writers to join those communities that you feel fit you somehow, because so much networking goes on in those online communities. And then, you know, there are always calls for submissions for anthologies and for other kinds of projects too. So, you know, the more, I mean, I think we have a romantic notion sometimes about writing in a vacuum and the, you know, the precious solitary writer. And for me, nothing could be further from the truth. Like, I need the community to inspire me and to occasionally kick me in the behind, and to motivate me sometimes when I'm tired and I've graded papers all day and don't feel like writing. I'll join an online writers group and then I'll feel like writing. So I think those writing communities are so important.
Absolutely. I mean, we're doing a Toni. Well, I'm not doing it. I'm participating in a Toni Morrison workshop. I've been doing every Tuesday, and I look forward to that workshop every Tuesday. It's just amazing what comes out of that. Just,
Yeah.
you know,
Writers
all
need
people.
other writers.
Yeah, we really do.
Writers need other writers.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of those writers communities that have sprung up online are very international and have exposed me to writers I never would have met had I not had these communities not sprung up, you know. And I've collaborated with writers in Ireland and met writers from India, and you know, these are people I never would have had contact with were it not for those online groups. So I'm a big fan of networking and being around other writers.
We can thank COVID-19 for having us get together virtually with people all over the world.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes. And perhaps this will bring us to respect each other's cultures
Perhaps.
and realize that we are all neighbors on one world, and finally learn to get together. Yeah, I feel those things too, Marcella.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If I can
It's good
say,
to know that people across the planet are dealing with the same sorts of daily struggles that
Yes.
we're all dealing with. So
Yeah.
it's kind of amusing. That's how I found all this, because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't work anymore. I did video in schools. The schools kicked me out right away.
Sure.
You can't be here. So it's over a year, and I started joining these different things. Earlier today, I was reading some of Stacy's poetry online. I'm going to be working on a project with Elisa, taking some of her poems and putting them to video, and seeing
nice.
if we can't get those on some programs. So yeah, the fact that you can meet up with someone from across the country or across the world. I'm talking with a young girl in Korea, about poetry and music. So this has really been a tremendous thing for me. And now that I really haven't been into the anthology, but I've got about 300 poems I can be sending out to places. So, this is really, really going to help me do some of the stuff.
Do you need more poems?
Yeah, you'll be swamped now, Dennis.
That's right. You messed up, Dennis.
Well, now that you said that, I'll mention the other anthology I'm working on for the Warren Artist Market, and it's about animal friends and animal friendship. So if you have anything about your pets and your dog, send them along.
I have one about COVID and dogs.
I wanted to say too,
Dennis, it sounds like a money-making opportunity to me.
Not usually. Once you mail out everybody a book, well, with the Warren Artist Market, when there was some profit left over, it went back into the schools for art. There's a little house that we've got that they give the kids lessons, and so that it goes back into that. And it started out as a community project, so everybody knows who we are, and we don't have to explain those things. But with the Warren Artist Market, that's where the money goes. But when you start mailing out, a complimentary good book to every person, there's not any profit left over usually.
Right.
And not at the level we're at anyway. When you get to be maybe well known and become, in a higher, more popular bracket, that may be, I don't know. But
Dennis, I just wanted to mention that there's a wonderful anthology called the Ekphrastic Review. I put that in the chat, and there's a ton of interest right now in ekphrastic poetry, which is poetry based on art. So it's poems that respond to visual art, paintings, poems that respond to dance, and other forms of art. So you might have to look into that.
I'm writing it down right now.
Okay.
I was going to say something. I lost my train of thought anyway. What you got there, Dennis?
That's one of my latest poems.
I have a question.
My granddaughter. My granddaughters were drawing on my driveway, and I wrote about them. I didn't get to see their recitals this year. I wasn't allowed to go. And the poem is about flowers and young dancers, and it ended up being they drew themselves on my driveway. And I really like the poem. We're going to be working it in a workshop this week, so I'm kind of interested in that.
Oh.
And I enjoyed the
question.
I think Stacy had a question too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get with Stacy.
I was wondering, especially since the pandemic, have you all maintained a daily writing practice, or do you mostly write your poetry when you're inspired. And if you wait for inspiration, so I know some people have a practice where they kind of get themselves inspired. If you have any thoughts, because usually my poetry comes to me like I'll wake up in the middle of the night with a poem. You know what I mean? Kind of like Julia Cameron talks about, where the muse just kind of passes through me. If I don't grab it and write it down, it'll go away. But I've been probably needing to establish a practice, I would think, just like my writing. I don't know. Anyway, anyone have any thoughts on that?
I do. The more you write, the more easily it comes to you. And if it's poetry, if you write poetry every day, it will come to a point where it'll flow out of you. It's amazing how it works.
I agree, Arlene. I
Yes.
can't stop writing. That's what I do all the time. It wakes me up. Like Lisa says, there's a poem in that.
Yes.
I have to say it doesn't work for me like that. I'm either a really lazy writer, which is probably true, or a really stubborn writer. I'm also a very critical writer. You know, it's hard for me to put things down that aren't just so. So for me, it's a discipline. I have to make myself write every day. And then I have a lot of weeding out to do. But I find that if I make myself write every day, I get some gems. Even if they're little snippets that I'll later have to move into something else, something comes. If you don't write every day, nothing comes.
Yeah.
That's kind of the bottom line. So.
And it's never a final product. I mean, I write, but I go back and I edit and I edit.
Yeah.
I find I write for my poetry mostly in the evenings. And then I was out today, and sometimes things come to me in titles. Like today, I had really good find at a thrift store at this a diaper bag, and I'm like, oh, magical diaper bag, because it just keeps accepting everything I put in it. I'm like, okay, that's going to turn into a poem, I can tell.
I like that.
And years ago, I mean, decades ago, I just wrote down the phrase floating turds. And last year that became a poem.
Wow.
It's a humorous poem. Lisa's heard it a few times. I just, out of the blue, you never know. Just you have to be kind of open to it and paying attention to what's coming out of your mouth. Because sometimes you'll say something and then you're like, wait a minute, what did I just say? And I'm fortunate that I come from a creative family, so I've kind of was trained that way. My father taught theater arts and directing at Brandeis, so I also had a visual piece. When we went to London, we'd see like cool alleyways, like, oh, that would be great for a scene. And now the scene becomes, is there, look at something in there, an object in there inspires a poem, or something inspires a scene. So all this stuff starts generating, and I think you'll find that the more creative you get with writing your poem, that's going to generate other areas of creativity that will wake up, and they feed off of one another. So to me, that's when the supply becomes endless.
With April being Poetry Month, I'm doing the NAPOWRIMO, a poem a day, and they're just little things mostly, but they're challenging because she often comes up with things that I would never think of. And that's the challenging part, and the part that opens me up, like Chana, you were just saying, that, you respond to it. I think writing to prompts helps. Rather than just waiting for inspiration and not knowing what it's about. If you write to, which is where the writing groups come in at, you write from prompts, and that kind of fields your mind into one alleyway, and then you can respond to it.
I also
I mentioned that because I started one writing group about 5 years ago, and there's only 6 of us all together. And I would throw out a prompt, and they would take 15 minutes to think about what they would say. Now, after 5 years, I throw out a prompt, they're writing immediately. So that's the repetition and writing on demand rather than waiting for inspiration.
So I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So when they're doing that, because poetry seems really personal and you're kind of letting the inside thoughts out. So if you're writing with prompts and writing every day, does it change that, or do you still get the same type of poetry?
Well, those personal things are within you all the time. So it's only when you sit with the pen and the paper that brings it out. So they're always there. And of course, with my writing group, we only meet twice a month. So it's not that we're writing together every day, but it's just how it has kind of honed their thinking. And personal, well, it's this, we've been writing together for 5 years and it's 6 of us. We write personal. We know each other very, very well. We've become very close friends because that's what writing does when you write continuously with someone. You know how? Yes. And of course, poetry isn't always personal. Sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's a protest. So it could be many, many things. It's really only a form of what is on your mind, how to get down into a form.
Yeah, because it's not like when you meet somebody and it's superficial things. I think when you're meeting somebody and working on that, it's a lot deeper than what the weather is and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the things that we have is a group called Poets Connection, and we have it on Living Poetry. We meet once a month on a Saturday morning, and we sometimes have workshops. Shannon did a workshop not too long ago. Sometimes we do germination workshops where we do the ekphrastic poetry, do that a lot, and write to that. So some of the people in this room here are in that group. Anybody's welcome to come. We meet one Saturday a month at 10 a.m. I am skipping April because it's April and there's just too much going on. But we'll be back in May. So be sure to keep an eye on Meetup for Living Poetry because you'll see a lot of events coming up. And matter of fact, a Wednesday night, we are having a meetup, and it's going to be like a celebration of living poetry. It's going to be a lot of people coming that have been in living poetry. I invited, and it's been accepted by the person who started the whole thing. And so I'm real excited about that as well. I do want to say, if you would like to be in a drawing to get a copy of my book, Heartbeats, not my book, but the anthology Heartbeats, put your email address in chat. And if you want to keep it private, just send it to me as a private email chat. And I will have a drawing. Put it in my little rotator and it picks it out for me. So want a shot at it, getting a free copy, go for it. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. This has been a lot of fun. I feel like I've learned some things, and I hope that it's been beneficial for you all. And I hope everybody got the links out of the chat so they can look at that some more. I'll be putting this up on YouTube, and I'll also be including those links in the YouTube show notes, so you'll be able to see them there as well.
It's been nice meeting you all. I've enjoyed meeting you and seeing the faces behind the names.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you again, Lisa.
Thank you all. And thank you to Marcella and Zan and Arlene for helping with this tonight, being our experts, and I really appreciate that. Wish you all a happy National Poetry Month.
Yes.
Keep writing.
Keep writing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Lauren.